If you ever visit Hollow Pines after Halloween, never, ever leave your lights off, because the moment your light blinks twice, it means the Hollow Watchers have found your house. Evan had heard that warning only once in his life, 3 years ago from an old lady who ran the only gas station near the mountain forest. But he never believed in local myths. He was a city guy, logical, practical. Legends were just stories told to spook tourists and sell cheap souvenirs. But now, as he and his girlfriend Claire drove up the narrow, winding road toward their rented cabin, he remembered her pale, trembling hands clutching the worn wooden counter, her voice cracking as she whispered that chilling warning. He could still picture the fear in her eyes, a fear so genuine it felt ancient. Claire nudged him, pulling him out of his thoughts. She asked, her warm smile a stark contrast to the cold memory. Her fingers intertwined with his, a comforting anchor in the suddenly unnerving quiet. Evan nodded, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. The truth was, the moment their car crossed under the old wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Hollow Pines," a profound sense of wrongness had settled over him. It was too quiet. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath, afraid to move through the dense canopy of trees. The pines themselves leaned inward over the road, their dark branches like skeletal fingers, as if they were listening, waiting. Claire, ever the romantic, pulled down her window, inhaling deeply. She trailed off, a slight frown creasing her brow. Evan smelled it too, a strange, unsettling aroma. It was like old damp wood, the kind that's been soaked in rain for decades, but it was mixed with something else, something sharp and metallic. He tried to shrug it off, to push the unease away. "We'll light the fireplace, make some dinner, relax." He said the words more for himself than for her. But the forest didn't relax. He noticed something strange immediately. 3 tall, thin, wooden markers standing at the edge of the trees, almost like silent sentinels. Each one was carved with deep, vertical slashes. They weren't letters or symbols, but Evan grabbed her wrist a little more forcefully than he intended. "Hey, let's get inside first. It's getting cold." He didn't want her anywhere near them. The cabin, thankfully, was a small pocket of warmth and normalcy. Cozy lights, old mismatched furniture, and a long glass window that offered a panoramic and slightly intimidating view of the forest. Claire, humming a cheerful tune, started unpacking their groceries to cook, her presence filling the small space with life. Evan stepped back outside to carry in their bags, and that's when he saw it. The first undeniable sign that something was terribly wrong. Deep between the dark trunks of the pines, a lantern-shaped glow flickered. It wasn't fire. It wasn't a flashlight beam. It was a soft, sickly yellow, a hollow glow, and it was floating. Evan froze, his hand gripping the car door handle. The air grew cold. The glow blinked once, a slow, deliberate pulse of light. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. His heart hammered against his ribs. He grabbed the bags, practically ran inside, and locked the door behind him, the deadbolt sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. He decided not to tell Claire. A reflection. Swamp gas. He desperately tried to rationalize it. After a delicious dinner of pasta and wine, they sat on the worn floral couch, watching the small fireplace crackle softly. The mood was cozy, romantic, perfect. It was exactly the escape they'd needed, until the cabin lights blinked. Twice. A quick, sharp off-on, off-on. Claire looked up at the ceiling fixture. Probably loose wires in this old place, she said, completely unfazed. But Evan's blood ran cold. The old woman's warning echoed in his head. No longer a distant memory, but a cold, immediate whisper. When the lights blinked twice, "They found you." He forced a smile, his lips feeling stiff. Yeah, must be the wiring. But inside, his stomach was a twisted knot of pure fear. That night, while Claire took a shower, the sound of the water, a temporary shield against the oppressive silence, Evan found himself drawn to the big living room window. He stared out into the pitch-black forest, his own reflection a pale, worried ghost in the glass. At first, he saw nothing, just the black, jagged silhouettes of pines against a starless sky. But then, his eyes adjusted, and slowly, something tall and impossibly thin emerged from behind a massive tree. It wasn't a person. The proportions were all wrong. It was a figure of limbs and shadows. No discernible features, no eyes, no face. It made no movements. It was just standing there. Evan blinked, a desperate attempt to clear his vision, to make it go away, and it was gone, vanished back into the absolute darkness from which it came. The bathroom door opened and Claire came out wrapped in a towel, her hair damp. Evan swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it difficult to speak. He couldn't tell her. She'd think he was crazy. They went to bed, but sleep was a luxury Evan couldn't afford. He lay awake, listening, his ears strained against the silence, waiting for a sound that didn't belong. The cabin's lights flickered softly, intermittently, every few minutes. A constant, terrifying reminder. At 2:11 a.m., according to the red glow of the bedside clock, he heard it. A faint sound, almost imperceptible at first, like footsteps brushing through dry pine needles just outside their bedroom window. The sound was slow, dragging, methodical, approaching. He sat up in bed, every muscle tensed, trying not to make a sound. Claire was fast asleep beside him, her breathing soft and even. The sound stopped directly outside the window. Evan held his breath, his lungs burning. He didn't move, didn't breathe. But this wasn't a knock. It was a softer, more exploratory sound, like a long, dry fingernail dragging gently across the surface of the glass, feeling its shape, searching for a weakness. Terror, cold and sharp, seized him. Evan fumbled for his phone on the nightstand. As he expected, no signal. He slowly, silently got out of bed, his feet cold on the wooden floor, and crept toward the window. The tapping stopped. A faint, sickly yellow glow appeared outside, floating, rising slowly until it was level with the window. Evan's heart slammed against his ribs so hard he thought it would break. The glow pulsed once. He stumbled backward, a strangled gasp escaping his lips as he knocked over a bedside lamp with a loud crash. Claire jolted awake, sitting bolt upright. Evan? What happened? He could only point a trembling finger at the window, unable to form words. Claire, now fully awake and alarmed, rushed to it and pulled the curtain aside. But the glow was gone. The tapping had stopped. Only impenetrable darkness remained. She let out a long, shaky breath, turning to face him. "Babe, you're scaring me. What did you see?" Evan finally found his voice, but it was a mere whisper, trembling and hoarse. Something was out there, watching us. Claire's expression shifted from fear to concern, a hint of frustration in her eyes. "There's nothing there. It was a dream." But as if in direct response to her words, the light fixture on the ceiling overhead blinked twice again. This time, it was slow, deliberate, mocking. Something outside the cabin shifted. A heavy sound, close, and this time, both of them heard it. The unmistakable sound of tall, slow footsteps, circling their tiny, isolated home in the dead, waiting silence of hollow pines. Evan had barely slept. The sound of those deliberate, circling footsteps outside the cabin had kept him wide-eyed until the first hint of dawn. But Claire, ever the pragmatist, insisted they had to see what was out there. As soon as the first weak rays of sunlight filtered through the dense canopy of hollow pines, she was ready to go. Morning in this forest didn't bring the usual sense of relief. It felt wrong. The sky was a pale, washed-out gray, making the ancient trees look even darker, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for something unseen. A strange, unnatural coldness clung to the air, a chill that had nothing to do with the season. As they stepped onto the porch, it felt almost personal, intentional. Evan's eyes immediately fell on the ground surrounding the cabin. The soil was disturbed, churned up in a perfect, unbroken circle. It looked as if something had paced around and around their little wooden refuge all night long. He knelt, his breath catching in his throat. The prints weren't from any animal he knew. They were long, narrow impressions, pressed too deeply into the earth to be human, and spaced with a chilling, methodical precision. Claire crouched beside him, her curiosity overriding her fear. She reached out a hand to touch the edge of one of the impressions, then snatched it back with a sharp gasp as if the ground itself had burned her. "Evan," she whispered, her voice trembling. These are not footprints." Evan didn't answer. He couldn't. His gaze was fixed on something just beyond the disturbed circle, half buried under a blanket of fallen leaves behind the cabin. He moved towards it, his feet feeling heavy, unreal. He knelt again, brushing away the dirt and grime until the carvings became clear. A series of crude slashes, tally marks counting something. But it was the word scratched faintly above them that made his blood run cold. Rough, barely legible, but undeniable. Claire. His heart seized in his chest, a frozen lump of ice. Claire had followed him. What is that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Evan grabbed her hand, his grip tight, desperate. "We're not staying here another night." But before another word could be spoken, a soft, distant sound cut through the oppressive silence. At first, he thought it might be the wind sighing through the pines. But no, this was different. It was a whispering, a low, thin hum, like a chorus of voices murmuring from deep within the forest. Claire flinched, backing away instinctively toward the cabin. "Do you hear that?" He did, and a wave of nausea rolled over him as he recognized the rhythm. It followed the same impossible pattern as the tapping from the night before. Slow, then slower, then stopping entirely, leaving a void of sound that was somehow worse than the whispering itself. He didn't hesitate. He pulled Claire inside, locking the heavy cabin door and drawing all the curtains, plunging them into a premature twilight. But it was no use. The whispering continued, a ghostly, searching sound drifting through the woods. Late in the afternoon, the isolation began to feel like a physical weight. Evan pulled out his phone, hoping for a miracle, a single bar of signal. Nothing. Just the words, "no service." Claire checked hers, a new layer of dread coating her voice. "Mine's dead." Evan frowned. "But you said it was at 80% last night." She nodded, plugging it into the wall outlet. Nothing happened. The charger wouldn't connect. No light, no buzz of electricity. It was as if the cabin itself, this patch of cursed ground, was actively cutting them off from the outside world. The hours crawled by in a tense, suffocating silence. As dusk began to bleed into the sky, the forest darkened with an unnatural speed. The shadows between the trees seemed to stretch and twist, coalescing into tall, wavering shapes that played tricks on the eyes. Claire, trying to create some semblance of normalcy, knelt to light the fireplace. Evan went to the kitchen to look for matches, a simple, mundane task. That's when he felt it. A single patch of air, shockingly cold, that brushed against his exposed skin. He spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. The kitchen was empty, but the window pane. It was fogged over, from the inside, as if someone or something had just breathed against the glass. Just then, Claire called his name, her voice strained and shaky. "Evan, come here, quickly." He rushed back into the living room. She was standing frozen, pointing a trembling finger toward the large window that faced the woods. Outside, nestled between two towering pines, a faint lantern-shaped glow hovered a few inches above the forest floor. It wasn't moving. It wasn't flickering. It was just watching. Evan grabbed Claire's arm, pulling her away from the window. "Don't look at it. Get away from the window." As he spoke, the eerie glow blinked once, a slow, deliberate pulse of light, and then faded into the deepening darkness. Claire's whisper was ragged with terror. "What are they? Why are they coming closer?" Evan swallowed hard against the dryness in his throat. "They're not coming closer," he said, the terrible truth dawning on him. "They're already here." They spent the next hour sitting back to back on the floor of the living room, every single lamp and light in the cabin blazing. The light was their only shield, a fragile barrier against the encroaching dark. But they both knew what was coming. At exactly 9:47 p.m., the main light in the living room flickered. Once, then twice. Evan's hand shot out and gripped Claire's arm. This was it. This was the warning. And then, as if on cue, the whispering from outside stopped. The sudden, absolute silence was deafening. A perfect, terrifying stillness that felt like a held breath. A moment later, a new sound began. A soft drag across the front porch. A slow, heavy movement, sliding across the old wood planks. Claire's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. Driven by a desperate need to know, Evan crept toward the window. He found a tiny gap in the curtain and peered out into the blackness. He didn't see the hovering glow this time. He saw a shape. Tall, impossibly thin, motionless. It was standing directly in front of their door, waiting, as if it knew they were watching, as if it were patiently waiting for them to open it. And then his blood turned to ice. On the inside of the fogged window glass, right in front of his face, 3 faint tally marks appeared, seemingly carved into the condensation by an invisible finger. Thanks for watching. If this story sent a chill down your spine, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there. As the last glimmer of the 3 tallies faded from the window pane, a chill colder than the night air snaked up my spine. Claire's fingers dug into my arm, her knuckles white. Evan. That mark. It was the same as the wooden post. I couldn't find the words to answer her. My mind was a whirlwind, desperately trying to connect the dots, but every sound was turning against us. The groaning floorboards, the rustling leaves, even the wind seemed to whisper threats. I pulled her away from the window, my voice barely a whisper. "We're leaving before sunrise. We just need to make it through tonight." She nodded, but her gaze was locked on the door, as if she could see right through the wood to whatever was waiting on the other side. The world outside fell silent. Not a peaceful silence, but a heavy, suffocating one that presses in on you until your ears start to ring. Then the porch groaned again. A slow, deliberate creak, as if something impossibly heavy was testing its weight on the boards. I snatched the iron poker from the fireplace, its cold metal a small comfort in my trembling hand. The footsteps didn't come to the door. They moved along the side of the cabin, stopping directly beneath our bedroom window. Claire's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. I held a finger to my lips, signaling for quiet. But the sound that came next wasn't footsteps. It was whispering. Not from the outside, but from all around us. It felt like it was coming from inside the walls themselves, a dozen voices murmuring just beyond the thin wood. The fire in the hearth roared to life, casting long, menacing shadows that clawed their way across the floor. Claire instinctively shrank away from the light. "They're inside the walls," she breathed, her voice filled with a dawning horror. I didn't want to believe it, but she was right. The whispers were moving, tracking our every step, a phantom chorus circling us from within the very structure of the cabin. Suddenly, a dull thud echoed from the attic, then another, and a third, each one slow and hollow, like a dead weight being dropped. No, Evan, please, don't check," Claire pleaded, her eyes wide with terror. But I knew the attic hatch was right down the hallway directly above us. The thuds grew louder, faster, a frantic, chaotic rhythm building to a crescendo before stopping all at once. The ensuing silence was a physical thing, a held breath waiting to be released. And then the lights flickered. Not twice, like before, 3 times. The number hung in the air between us. "Why 3?" I finally managed to ask. Claire just shook her head, silent tears tracing paths down her cheeks. A faint creak from above drew our attention. The attic hatch, caked in dust and disuse, was moving. A fine powder of grime rained down from its edges. I took a step back, raising the poker, my heart hammering against my ribs. The hatch stopped. The fire dimmed to a weak orange glow. The only sound was the ragged pace of our own breathing. Then, through a small crack in the curtains, I saw it. 3 points of light, glowing like lanterns in the pitch-black woods. They were spaced perfectly apart, forming a straight, unblinking line. They were watching us. Claire's voice was a brittle crack. "They're multiplying." I pulled her into a tight embrace. "We're leaving now. Right now." I yanked open the kitchen drawer, fumbling for the car keys. But my hand froze. Lying there, nestled amongst the silverware, was a wooden marker. It was clean, freshly whittled, and carved into the wood, just beneath Claire's name, was a new one. Evan. Claire stumbled back, a scream caught in her throat. How did it get inside?" I had no answer. Before I could even form a thought, the front door began to make a sound I'll never forget. It wasn't creaking open. The wood was breathing, expanding and contracting, as if something of immense size was leaning its full weight against it. Outside, the 3 lantern glows brightened, their light spreading through the pines like the widening eyes of a predator. And from the cracks around the door, a single, clear whisper slithered into the room, cutting through the silence. "Midnight. Have you ever felt a silence so deep it feels like the world is holding its breath?" That's what it was like in the cabin, right before the whisper. It was barely a sound, just a drift of cold air that seemed to form a single word. Midnight. And in that exact instant, every light in the house dimmed. It wasn't a power surge, it was intentional, as if the house itself knew what was coming. I grabbed Claire's hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. "We're leaving. Now," I whispered, my voice tight, before they reached the door. We crept toward the back exit, trying to be ghosts in our own nightmare. But the old floorboards betrayed us, creaking with every single step, like they were sending out a warning to whatever was waiting outside. Claire's knuckles were white as she clutched a small wooden marker we'd found, the one with our names carved into it. She refused to leave it behind. The back door was our only way out. I twisted the lock, but it wouldn't budge. It wasn't jammed, more like held, as if someone on the other side was leaning against it. I threw my shoulder into it, once, twice. The wood groaned in protest. Then, with a sudden crack, it gave way, and the cold night air rushed in, stealing our breath. But the forest outside, it wasn't dark anymore. Dozens of soft, lantern-like glows floated silently between the pine trees. They were arranged in perfect, unnerving rows, like an audience waiting for a show to begin. They weren't moving toward us. They were just there, waiting. Claire's whisper was barely audible. "They're not chasing us. Evan, they're guiding us." And she was right. I felt it too, an eerie, invisible pressure nudging us forward toward a narrow trail that started just behind the cabin. The same trail I'd seen on that old, brittle map we found in the drawer, the one the locals in town had refused to even talk about. They called it the Path of Hollow Watchers. With no other choice, we stepped out of the cabin and into the woods. As we moved, the glows moved with us, mirroring our pace, keeping their distance. Behind each light, a tall, distorted silhouette began to take shape. Long limbs, hollow faces, watching us in absolute stillness. The deeper we walked, the more the world fell away. The sounds of the forest, the crickets, the wind, all gone. Even our own footsteps seemed to be swallowed by the heavy, unnatural silence. Claire squeezed my hand so hard I thought my bones would crack. "Why us?" she asked, her voice trembling. I had no answer, but the wooden marker in her other hand felt strangely warm, almost alive, as if it remembered its owners and knew where we were going. The trail twisted and turned until it opened into a clearing. It was a perfect circle, surrounded by towering ancient pines that seemed to touch the sky. In the very center stood a flat stone slab covered in carvings, and my blood ran cold. The carvings were identical to the tally marks on the wooden marker Claire was holding. 2 sets of tallies on the stone glowed with a faint, sickly light. 3 lines under Claire's name, 3 lines under mine, and right beside them, a new set of empty, shallow marks, just waiting to be filled. Claire's voice was a choked sob. "Evan, this is where they bring people." Before I could even process what that meant, the lights surrounding the clearing flared, growing brighter and stretching taller. The Hollow Watchers stepped out from between the trees. They were impossibly thin, towering over us, their faces just hollow impressions where eyes should have been. They didn't move any closer, but their presence was a physical force, pressing down on the air, making it hard to breathe. Then, one of the glows separated from the others. A smaller, hunched figure emerged from the tree line. It was barely human-shaped. It shuffled forward, carrying something in its long, spindly hand. It dropped the object on the ground right in front of me and then retreated back into the shadows without a sound. My hand was shaking as I reached down to pick it up. It was the key to the cabin, but it wasn't the same. Freshly carved into the metal were 3 words: "Return before dawn." Claire's breath hitched. They're letting us go?" I looked from the key to the glowing tally marks on the stone, and I knew she was wrong. This wasn't a release. I shook my head, my eyes wide with terror. "No," I said. "They're warning us." As if in response, the entire forest pulsed once with a dim, ethereal light. The 3 tally marks beneath our names on the stone slab glowed brighter. They weren't just carvings anymore. They were a record, a claim. The Watchers were marking our passage, marking us. There was no time to think. "Run," I whispered, pulling Claire with me. We sprinted back the way we came, back down the suffocatingly silent trail. Behind us, the glows of the Watchers didn't chase. They just blinked in a slow, perfect rhythm. Once, twice, once again. Following, watching, counting. We burst out of the woods and scrambled back into the cabin. I slammed the door, turned the lock, and we both collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. For a precious moment, there was only silence. The forest outside was completely dark again, the lights gone as if they had never been there. The show was over. Then the lights inside the cabin flickered. Once, twice, and then stopped. Everything was still. My gaze fell to the table where Claire had dropped the wooden marker, and my heart stopped. A new line had been carved into the wood, right below the other 3. A 4th tally. Our night in Hollow Pines wasn't over. It had just begun. And the Watchers. They had only just started counting. Thank you so much for joining me for this story. If you enjoy this kind of chilling tale, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us bring more of these dark stories to light. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.